Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pints and Politics. As always, you got Drew, we got Mike. Thanks all so much for tuning in today. Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks, Mike, hasn't it?
It is.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've been gone. I just took a vacation to Peru, which was a little impromptu, but a lot of fun.
I
And
hope to hear about it next time we get together. That'd be an awesome trip to go on.
yeah, it was really neat. Up in the mountains, we went to Cusco City and Lima. Cusco City, Mike, was the capital of the not the Aztecs, the Inca. My bad. A lot of interesting thing about the Incas, and maybe some of it will spill in today. But more importantly, we just saw the end of session in St. Paul. Is that correct?
Yes and no, I guess. Technically, the end of session was supposed to be Monday, and
Okay.
but we didn't get all of our work done. So now we're going to end up having a special session at the call of the governor, I guess, or when we get our paperwork and everything else done. So, as you know, the process, the House and the Senate bills have to concur,
Hmm.
and they have conference committees, so they um, get together and work out the finer details. So the chair in each of the committees and usually the vice chair get together, the House, the Senate, and they talk about what's in those bills. They look at the numbers, have to crunch everything, make sure everything aligns and agree. And then it comes back to the houses for final passage.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to process now. We've got some bills that were done. A bunch aren't. The biggest line items, of course, is health and human services and education. And that's, roughly two-thirds of our budget.
Hmm.
And those two things are not done. And there's other ones done that aren't done as well. Taxes will probably be the last thing that we do. But as it sits right now, we're going to a special session. We just don't know when yet.
That's a real kick to the gut, considering how session started, 2 weeks late, 3 weeks late.
That's exactly right. So you don't show up for work, show up 3 weeks late, and now we get kicked into special session. It's kind of an insult, really.
Yeah. No,
And then it
I'm almost of the mind of saying that nothing should get done because of that. It's what you get, right?
well, who ends up suffering or who ends up paying if we don't end up finishing our work? It's the taxpayers.
Yeah.
It's the citizens of the state. So then you're going to have both sides pointing the blame at the other side, and the people are the ones that end up hurting.
Hmm.
So that's the downside of all this. And it should have been done on time. Even with the late start, we could have if the appetite was there, I would say.
Yeah.
But some of the comments that I heard for some of the chairs on our side, we have a tied House. The Senate has one lead majority for the Democrats. And then, of course, you got Comrade Walz as our governor.
Right.
And what I heard from some of the leads in the various committees in the House was that the Democrats are still legislating like they're in the trifecta, which is what we had last session. Well,
Right.
they're not in the trifecta. There has to be some give and take. There has to be some negotiating. There has to be some things you don't like in these bills, but they were still negotiating like they controlled everything. And that's not the way this was supposed to work. So we'll be going to a special session. It's been a little bit difficult. Um, I am not a chair of any committees, so I don't have to go to the conference committees and so forth that are going on. I've watched many of them, um, but we'll see what happens. There's actually something in the news today about the health or the human services aspect of it, and how some of the reporters from the Star and Tribune were invited in by a Senator Abler, if I remember correctly. But then the reporters were told to leave during that part of the conference committee because it was closed during the
Hmm.
negotiations. And that's how is that right?
Yeah, it's really not. If they're doing closed, is it just the senator doing the closed negotiations, or is there any
Well,
Republicans involved at all?
there was House members there. House Democrats, House Republicans. So the senator said that the reporter should be left or should be allowed in the room. And it sounds like others said no, the reporter shouldn't be in there. So
Yeah.
so much for transparency. You know, that negotiation, that part of the process, I
Mhm.
feel should be wide open. So it's a little bit of discouraging, especially even the Star and Tribune said, this isn't the way government is supposed to operate.
Right. It's
But I
and we've
don't know.
always seen shady things, especially from the Democrats,
Yeah,
but interesting. I didn't hear about that. I heard about a budget deal getting passed, and when Tim Walz signed it and was talking about it, people were booing him. What was going on there? Do you know?
there was a press conference. The
Hmm.
leaders of the House, Senate, Comrade Walls had a press conference, and one of the things that was going to be cut was um, the money for illegal aliens for the healthcare,
Yeah.
and just the kids or children would still be allowed to have the healthcare, but adults wouldn't. And there was a group of Democrat, um, I believe it was House and Representative members who were banging on the door and protesting at the deal that was made. So
Mhm.
I, I I understand the protests. I really do. People want their voices heard. You can stand there, you know, have signs. At the same time, when you start banging on doors, when you start being loud, obnoxious, and I
Yeah.
see this all the time, there's many times when we've had to not really push our way through the crowd, but try to get through a crowd just to get the floor of the house. And that
Right.
really bothers me. I mean, that's not right.
Well, it's annoying.
Well, and I think that's why when there was a protest here in Long Prairie last Saturday, I don't like to see that. I
No.
really don't. It's like I
No,
have
I
to,
heard about that one too. And again, I was gone, so it's kind of hard for me.
right?
But yeah, it's just like, what is going on right now? One second, I got an animal. I apologize, guys.
You got the kitty
Um,
kid coming to see you.
yeah, yeah, it's a lot of fun. But shoot, now I lost my train of thought. Yeah,
We're
these
talking about the
protests, it's
protest.
wild. And I even saw a tweet from Walter Hudson about how like representatives are being threatened by other representatives. It's just,
Well,
it's insane.
yeah, I don't know what that was in reference to.
It was in reference to I think it was in reference to the protesting of the budget
Okay.
cuts. And
But
it's just, it's wild to me. It always comes back to the illegal immigrants too. There's a lot
well,
of passion there.
think about it this way. When we had protests across the country before under Trump's first term,
Hmm.
look at what happened. I mean, it was opportunistic in a way. There was, the George Floyd and all this other stuff that happened, but there was protests in uh, what was there? Seattle out there, Portland.
Yep. Portland and Seattle, both of them.
Right. So there was a bunch of those protests, and they were kind of all over the place. Well, now it's even more organized, and it's in different locations, but you have to ask the question why, and what's the motive? Why are they doing this? And really, it's almost a communist tactic. It is. It's a same thing that's gone on in other countries before. You're trying to get public support
Hmm.
or sway in the court of public opinion and get other people to not support the president, not support the agenda that they have, America first. And who wants to see America fail? If you're against what the president's doing, you're basically saying we would rather see America fail because you're supporting China with these protests. That's our biggest
Yep.
adversary in these trade wars right now. So if you're trying to protest against Trump, you're basically protesting for China. And that's a bad position to be in. And that's why when I see it in my own small town, it really bothers me because I wonder if those people truly understand what they're doing.
Yeah, and and again, the Long Prairie ones just blow me away because I think a couple of weeks ago there was also one in Wadena,
Hmm.
which is also wild because like these are two like nothing ever happens areas. They're so quiet. And I've also heard that most of them are from out of county, so I don't know where they're coming from.
Well, I know the first one in Long Prairie, there were individuals from, I was told, Mahnomen, Douglas County, and a few other places, but there was some locals there. But
Yeah.
it was a mix. It was a mixed bag. Now, this one last Saturday, I wasn't there because we had end of session. There
Hmm.
were far less protesters on the Democrat side. And what I noticed though, because somebody sent me pictures and kind of gave me the rundown as things were happening, was that they had signs that were pre-made. First time they didn't. Most of it was homemade signs, show
Hmm.
up with your homemade stuff. This one, these were the plastic pre-made signs. Where'd they come from? Who printed them? Why are they there? This was much more organized than it was last time, although there were far fewer people.
Yeah. That's weird. At Yeah, yeah, we live in a we're like 2.5 hours from the metro where most of this stuff happens. It's very strange to me seeing it happen out here in effectively the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't.
I don't appreciate it. I really
Yeah,
don't.
so we should be keeping an eye on that, really. Keep an eye
Hmm.
on the Antifa and the leftist act and the activist groups, really.
Right.
So
Yep.
interesting. But by the way, back to end of session, what all got passed?
Um, oh, I'd have to look at the list of the bills that have gone through. It hasn't been a huge omnibus bill like was passed at the end of last session.
Well, that's
There have
good.
been, right, there have been bills that have gone through. Public safety we did the other evening. Um, I'm trying to remember. Higher ed we talked about, but no, that one wasn't passed, I don't believe. So some of them that have been, and I've got the chart on my phone here, what has been passed and hasn't, but in all honesty, it's kind of a whirlwind the last few days. It's a hurry
Mhm.
up and wait sort of thing. And
Oh,
I don't remember which ones all went through, but they have been broken down. Oh, the agriculture bill we did, which I voted for. And you put me on the spot. I don't remember the other ones that we did.
well, you mentioned the agriculture bill. Let's just list off your favorite ones, the biggest wins.
Um, you know what? I've got a problem with almost all of these bills,
Yeah.
and I'll explain why. And I have a speech prepared just for this, which
Okay.
I'll have to get to at some point in time. I'm not going to do it today, but
Yeah,
let's
we'll get
look
around to
at let's look at the budget. Okay. We went from $50 billion budget in the state of Minnesota, my first term. So
it.
2022 to 2024, the budget went from 50 billion to 70 billion. Okay. That's with the $18 billion surplus. That's $10 billion in tax increases. And
Hmm.
our budget went up $20 billion, right? So now where we're at, and both sides are touting this victory and saying that we cut the budget. So our budget is going to be about $67 billion, right?
You're right.
That's what they're claiming as a victory. I don't quite view it that way as a victory. I would say that our victory is probably stopping a few of the bills because what the Democrats said is we're facing and they said it right on the floor of the House. They said we're facing a deficit in the future in the 26, 27, moving ahead in the budget. And in order to balance that budget, we're going to need to raise taxes. That was their solution, not cutting spending. We just need to raise more taxes. So they looked at taxing social media, your Twitter, Facebook, things like that, which would just fall down onto the consumer, onto the taxpayer again, onto the middle class. The
How do
big,
you tax social media?
well, you could tax the services. It was the first ever discussed social media tax in the country, I believe. How they would all work that, I'd have a hard time figuring that out because
Yeah.
would service providers just say, okay, we're not going to do it? We're not going to provide in Minnesota. I don't know how they would do that, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Isn't that what happened with Uber too?
That was an issue with Uber. Yep.
Yeah. It's it's wild. Um, yeah, I mean, did the Democrats even consider spending less money? Like,
Well,
I hate to be rude, but
not really.
no, not really. Okay.
The other thing that's really interesting, and this is how both sides are saying we cut the budget, right? This is what they're saying. The truth of the matter is what they did last time around under the trifecta on the 24, 22, 24 budget is they put automatic inflators on every department. Okay. So what they're saying is because of inflation, the budget of every department has to go up based on inflation, 3 to 4%.
Right.
If the budget in transportation was, let's just say, $1 billion, and it goes up 3, 4%, it's going to have to go up, what, 30 million, something like that. Seems right. In
Right.
order to keep up with inflation. So the budget automatically goes up every time,
Right.
which should it?
No, it shouldn't because wages don't go up that fast.
Well, yeah, your average wage is going up a 1.5 to 2% is about what happens in the state of Minnesota. But what they're saying is their spending is going to go up that
Yeah.
much. Actually, it's at 300 million, not 30 million.
Jeez.
Okay. So what they did this time around to say that we balance the budget, that we're not spending as much, is they simply said we're not going to add those automatic inflators this time around, but we'll do it next time.
Right.
So now, therefore, it looks like on paper that we cut the budget about $3 billion.
Well, I've noticed that they're also when we talk, I think we talked about this last time, but they're also increasing the demand on the county for county levy. So they're increasing the taxes while saying they're not the ones increasing it for property taxes.
That's the downshifts that we've talked about before. Those are the
And
programs and the non unfunded mandates from the state that are coming down to the counties.
yeah, so it's that sneaky way of doing things.
Yep, in
And then
order
I
to,
suppose this segues into something that I learned on my vacation down in Peru is that there's a lot of people down there with unfinished houses, and that was being explained to me. And it was being explained to me in a way of it lowers their property value, which lowers their taxes. So with the high property tax, you're going to see more rundown houses. If that
so
makes sense.
right, it does. Once you start taxing people or they tax certain things, and this has happened throughout history, and I know we've talked about this before, but I'll bring it up again. In Europe, they had a window tax, I think in the 1500s.
Window tax?
A window tax. So if you were wealthy, you would put more windows in your houses, right? Because
Okay.
you could afford the glass, you could afford the windows. Whereas if you had smaller homes, you generally had less windows because it was expensive. It was harder to insulate all of this stuff. So you would have less windows in a cheaper home.
Hmm.
So what ended up happening? The rich people, the people with means, basically said, okay, if you're going to tax my house because I have more windows, we're just going to board up some of these windows. We're going to fill those openings up with brick, and now I don't have to pay as much taxes, right? The poor
Yeah,
people
right.
who maybe only had one or two windows, they're not going to board up their windows.
No, they need them.
They need them. So they ended up paying more taxes than the rich people did who simply boarded up their windows. This is a common thing throughout history. The tax the rich has always happened and it will continue to happen. And what happens with it is the people who have the means will generally find a loophole so they don't have to pay those taxes.
Yeah, and then
And
the poor still end up paying more in taxes, generally speaking.
exactly, exactly. And I know I've heard different numbers, different estimates. Somebody else I was talking to today about this said that 52% of every dollar that you earn is taken in taxes.
That sounds right.
52%. And I thought it was about 45 from some of the readings that I've looked at or stuff that I've looked at and studied. Think about that. That's over half of every dollar you earn. If you're making $20 an hour, about half of that is going to taxes. So you only have about $10 left.
Oh yeah.
Isn't that
If
kind
you
of
work a
crazy?
blue collar job and put in a W-2, you notice that.
Well, most people I don't think do.
That's fair. They just see it coming out of their paycheck and they get angry.
They say I'm making $20 an hour and they're happy with it. They don't pay attention to the taxes that come out of it automatically. I think we
Which is
could
kind of
change.
funny that you say that because there's a coworker I have and we were talking a while ago and he said making 20 bucks an hour feels like making minimum wage now.
Yeah, it pretty much is.
It pretty much is. After taxes and everything. And taxes is all about government spending,
That's exactly right.
right?
And I think that's what
Increasing.
frustrates me so much is because every time they talk about a new taxes or a new tax on a service or a good or whatever, it simply rolls down onto the middle class, the working class. The people with means are not going to pay these taxes. They're going to figure out one way or another. They're called tax avoidance strategies, and they're going to figure out how to do it. And then it hurts the working class even more.
Right. And then it's gonna make our communities less beautiful. You end up
Yep.
with more trashy, boarded up windows and
Right.
unfinished buildings. It's gonna look sad.
Well, there still is buildings in Europe that have had their windows boarded up for those 1500 years or 500 years already.
500 years?
Since that tax went on, look it up. You can see pictures of it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe we'll see if we can't get some up on the show here, but holy
Yeah.
crap. Oh, did you have anything else you want to bring up today to the viewers? Session, unsession, protest, riots.
Well, I've got to tell you, there's something that's been bothering me, and we talked about it a little bit before the show, and I want to read it if I can. It takes a couple minutes.
Absolutely.
We got time.
Yeah, we got time.
And it goes back to Davy Crockett.
Oh,
Everybody knows
good.
the story of Davy Crockett.
Since we're
And
on taxes.
yeah, and he was also a congressman. Most people don't even realize that. They heard the stories about Davy Crockett and, at the Alamo and fighting bears in Kentucky and Tennessee and wherever else. But he was also a congressman. So
Yep.
I want to read this because I think it's very interesting. It said there had been a fire in suburban Georgetown during Crockett's first term in Congress. He was among several congressmen who rushed to the scene, helped to fight the fire, and sought shelter for the victims who were shivering on a cold night. The very next morning, Congress appropriated 20,000 for the relief of the victims. Crockett spoke in favor. Because there was opposition, the vote on the issue was recorded in the journals of the day's proceedings, and a listing was made for those who voted for and those who voted against the appropriation. Crockett said that when he went back home to district to run for re-election, he stopped to solicit the vote of a farmer plowing in his field. The man remembered Colonel Crockett and said he had voted for him the first time, but he could not vote for him again. The farmer had read a newspaper account of the $20,000 gift to victims of the fire. He saw Crockett's name listed as supporting the measure. The farmer then proceeded to explain to Congressman Crockett, and this is his words now, quote, the power of collecting and dispersing money at pleasure is the most dangerous power that can be trusted to man, particularly under our system of collecting revenue, which reaches every man in the country, no matter how poor he may be, and the poorer he is, the more he pays in proportion to his means. What is worse, it presses upon him without his knowledge where the weight centers. For there is not a man in the United States who can ever guess how much he pays to the government. While you are contributing to relieve one, you are drawing from thousands who are even worse off than he. If you had the right to give anything, the amount was simply a matter of discretion with you, as you might have the right to give 20 million as 20,000. If you have the right to give to one, you have the right to give to all. And as the Constitution neither defines charity nor stipulates the amount, you are at liberty to give to any and everything which you may believe or profess to believe is charity, and in any amount you may think proper. You will easily perceive what a wide door this would open for fraud and corruption and favoritism on the one hand, and for robbing the people on the other. No congressman, no colonel, Congress has no right to give charity. Individual members can give as much of their own money as they please, but they have no right to touch a dollar of the public money for that purpose. If twice as many houses had burned in the country as in Georgetown, neither you nor any other members of Congress would have thought to appropriate a dollar for our relief. There are about 240 members of Congress. If they had shown their sympathy for the suffering by contributing each 1 week's pay, it would have made over 13,000. There are plenty of wealthy men around Washington who could give 20,000 without depriving themselves of even luxury of life. The congressmen chose to keep their own money, which, if reports are true, some of them spend not very credibly. And the people about Washington, no doubt, applauded you for relieving them from the necessity of giving that what was not theirs to give. The people have delegated to Congress by the Constitution the power to do certain things. To do this is to authorize to collect and pay monies and for nothing else. Everything beyond is usurpation and a violation of the Constitution. So you see, Colonel, you have violated the Constitution in what I consider a vital point. It is a precedent fraught with danger to the country, for when Congress once begins to stretch its powers beyond the limit of the Constitution, there's no limit to it and no security for the people. I have no doubt you acted honestly, but that does not make it any better, except as far as you are personally concerned. And as you see, I cannot vote for you. And I love that.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've heard that such a long time ago. And it's from that letter that I realized that government physically cannot be a charity. And how long have we been saying that?
Exactly right. And we voted on something this week which has bothered me to no ends. And I think about the burden it's going to put on people in my area. Todd and Wadena County, poorest counties in the state, are going to end up bailing out another area who is going through a hard time. I understand that. You know, every citizen has a moral and spiritual obligation to help each other out.
Mhm.
Fine. Government is not supposed to do that by
No.
taking from one who's struggling already to give to another. And that favoritism is really what is causing, which is leading to some of the polarization I feel in our politics.
Oh, absolutely. You
Because
see
when
it.
we start picking winners and losers in this process, when we say this group, which is disadvantaged, this group, which needs help, has to pay, has to receive, or gets to receive this, other groups are paying for this. And
Yeah, and
other
you
groups,
alienate those groups paying for them.
exactly. And sooner or later, people say, well, where's mine? When I'm
Exactly.
struggling, where's mine? And that's just a natural human reaction. And here I voted on something which has bothered me to no ends for the last several days. And thinking of that letter has weighed pretty heavily.
Did you vote
So
no on the bill?
I voted yes on a bill
Oh,
that I have regretted since. And it's tough to think about it now. Obviously, in government or in this position, you vote for things, you weigh out the options, and you make your best decision. And this one, I made a bad decision. And
Oh, it happens.
how do you make that up to the people? That's where I'm torn. So I learned a valuable lesson, and I hope that I don't make the same mistake again.
Oh, we could be like Hercules and put you through 12 trials, so we could do that if that makes you feel better. I want the head of a Timberwolf, and we can find your penance in that. Like the
Okay.
actual dog, not an NBA player. But yeah, no, that was a great letter.
Well,
I'm glad you brought that up. I totally forgot about it. But the lesson truly is that again, the government cannot be charitable. You can't take from the poor and give to the someone else. It doesn't matter who it is. It's not right.
right. And someday when you're down at the Capitol with me, um, if you're sitting in the House chamber and you look up above in this on the ceiling on the wall, actually, there's an inscription up there. Part of it's by Thomas Jefferson. And he mentions something. He mentions a word, and I don't have the quote here with me, but he talks about frugality. Does government even know what frugality is anymore?
I'm
Does
gonna go.
government?
No.
Yeah. Look at our budget. When we can raise that budget, $17 billion over the course of 3 years, and then tout how good of a job we're doing cutting spending, that's not frugality. For every $1 billion that the state budget goes up, it costs every man, woman, and child in the state about $200.
Mhm.
$200. Okay. But now think of this. Not every man, woman, and child in the state pays taxes, right? If you're
So
under
it goes
18,
up for the people
that's
who
right.
do. Yeah.
So if you're under 18, you're probably not paying much. If you're over 65, you're not paying much. So that $17 billion, that $200 per billion is about 3,400,
That's a
right?
lot for one person.
Now per man, woman, and child. But
Hmm.
think about it this way. Like I said before, take off the 18 and under, take off the 65 and over, you can almost double that number. So your working class in the state of Minnesota are on the hook for about another $6,000 per biennium.
Yeah, and that's
But
rough. That is hard because the economy is not super great right now.
that's
But Mike,
exactly
before
right.
we go, I do have to cut you off, Rory. It is
Sorry.
time to end the show.
Once
Oh,
I ramble and it's tough to stop.
great. I just let it go most of the time. But it's good. Most of it's yeah, it's good stuff. It's people we need to hear it. But yeah, ultimately government can't be a charity, cut spending, right?
Yes.
Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching Pints and Politics. As always, we got Drew Peterson, Mike Weiner. God bless.